Okay, now our final speaker for today's session right before lunch is Jens, and he's going to talk something about Lego survey. So now you can go.
Okay. Hi, thank you. Yeah, first of all, my apologies for not being there in person. That had been my plan. And if I were you and I had traveled to Paris, I would certainly expect people to be there around in person. But sorry, that didn't work out this time. In that context, also thanks to the organizing committee for allowing me to present this way. In the end, I felt it was worth it to do it like this because several of you want to know more about Lego. And so, this format unfortunately has to suffice this time. To make things more interesting, at the moment I seem to be losing my voice, so let's see how we are going to get through this. So, Lego. Lego studies molecular clouds in the Milky Way, like this one. For those of you not very familiar with molecular clouds, I understand that there's also a bit of a machine learning community in this meeting. This is a molecular cloud in the Milky Way, something like 4,000 parsecs away from Earth, of order 10,000 solar masses of dense gas, and has a size of, say, 15 parsecs or so. And there are obviously many such molecular clouds in the Milky Way. And we study their star formation in the Milky Way easily in images like this one, which is an infrared image, which shows us the young stars in infrared colors. And then the dense gas you can, in this case here, see as a dark shadow, but obviously also you can use telescopes like Herschel that show the dust emission from these clouds in nice dust emission. And these are all very nice tools, but one thing that has been missing and continues to be missing on a large scale is a census of molecular line emission of such molecular clouds. And this is what LEGO is doing. LEGO is mapping molecular clouds in the Milky Way, like this one here, G11, the snake, in large sets of molecular emission lines to take maps like these. A map like this has taken several 10 hours to observe on the IRAM 30-meter telescope. And because it's so time intensive, that's the reason why we have very few such maps at the moment. And well, that's the point of LEGO. And Lego obviously is not only me, is a large set of people. Some of them help with data processing, some of them with observation, and others with science analysis. Um, and yeah, that's the team. Let me tell you something about the science background of the entire project. And we have already heard earlier today, for example, something by Antonio Ocero about the value of molecular line observations of other galaxies. The fundamental problem being for that community that you study some galaxy and then you want to study the molecular clouds shown here in green. But then, unfortunately, the telescopes that we have currently are not really able to finally resolve the molecular clouds in other galaxies. So the trick that we can use is to think about what's actually happening there in a bit more detail. So if you think about it, one single telescope beam placed on a nearby galaxy shows several molecular clouds, and then those molecular clouds are composed of, on one hand, molecular hydrogen, which is the bulk of the mass and and in particular the dense gas that's relevant for star formation. And then we have other molecules sprinkled in like HCN. HCN is a really nice molecule because it's so bright. And so we often try to study its luminosity in nearby galaxies. And we have other species like N2H plus that are also detectable, but not so easily detectable in nearby galaxies. And we also measure their luminosities. As I show here in gray, we are essentially trying to measure line luminosities in several molecular emission lines in nearby galaxies. And of course, we also have young stars. And if you count the number of young stars, that tells you something about the star formation rate. What we really want to have, or what the extragalactic community arguably is really after at the moment, is to understand the relationship between the mass and dense gas and the star formation rate. Unfortunately, for that to work, you would need a direct measure of the mass of dense gas in other galaxies, and we don't really have that. So we can't really get this first thing that we really want, the relationship between the mass of dense gas and the star formation rate. What we can get is the relationship between line luminosities and the star formation rate. And you have already heard earlier today about the HCN to star formation rate relation, and that's one of those relationships that's being used. But it's not really what we want. We want the first one, the relationship between mass of dense gas and the star formation rate. But maybe if we had an idea about converting line luminosities to masses of dense gas in galaxies, then we could kind of connect mass of dense gas and star formation rate in a more direct way. But for that to work, we need to have this relationship between line luminosities and masses of dense gas, and that's exactly what LEGO tries to figure out. And it does so by studying individual molecular clouds in the Milky Way. So we study objects that are nearby, that are well resolved, often also well studied. And then as a consequence, you can get the mass of dense gas, for example, from detailed observations of dust. And then you can get the line luminosity by simply mapping those molecular clouds. Simply mapping ignores, however, the aspect that these observations are really time consuming and you spend several 10 hours per cloud. And that makes observations like this one challenging. Obviously, a related project is the Orion B project and the DAOISM project that are lending the name to this conference, that are trying to do this very science for one particular very large molecular cloud. And LEGO essentially tries to do the same thing, but for a larger sample of molecular clouds. This is how some of the data look, just as an example for Orion. On the left, we have a map of dust emission. From that, we can learn the mass of dense gas. And then we have emission line maps like N2H plus and HCN, from which we can get the line luminosities. And what we finally want to have is this proportionality constant, alpha, which relates the mass of dense gas to some particular line luminosity. And then in the end, we want to put this all together. As I said, we essentially want to have the relationship between the mass of dense gas and the star formation rate. In the Milky Way, there are ways to measure this directly, but then we have other galaxies where we only have the relationship between the star formation rate and, for example, the HCN luminosity. And then we want to place these galaxies on the star formation mass density diagram. If we know this proportionality constant there between the mass of dense gas and HCN luminosity, then we can move galaxies onto this relationship and try to understand how galaxies work in relationship to the Milky Way. I don't really have the time to go into this today, but at the moment there's actually a bit of an offset if you do this in a detailed way with the measurements of alpha that we have at hand. But that's a bit of a topic for a different talk. So here I focus today on LEGO itself, because later today we, for example, have a talk by Lukas Neumann who talks about some science applications of LEGO, and the same with Minou Greve, also, I believe, talking later today. So let me tell you a bit more about the survey itself. So we cover a large spectral setup. This spectral plot here just shows the complexity of line emission in other galaxies. Just as an example, spiral arm in M51, and you see that there are plenty of interesting molecular emission lines to be studied, and they trace different physical processes, and so of course we also want to use them. But in order to use them well, we need to understand the detailed physics in the Milky Way, and that's what LEGO is about. We cover large spectral ranges. For 25 targets, we cover 85 to 115 gigahertz essentially continuously. And then for some targets, we go down to 72 gigahertz. This took of order 1,000 hours of telescope time on the IRAM 30-meter telescope. This is an overview of the sample. There are 4 target groups, 4 nearby clouds, which we study to essentially establish at a very high physical resolution the physics of line emission, similar again to what the Orion B project of Jerome tries to do, respectively, the DAOISM project. But then we also have luminous complexes, 3 of those in the Milky Way, to understand the impact of high luminosity. Then there is a galactic disk sample that simply samples how things differ between the inner and outer galactic disk, and a low metallicity sample to understand what's going on if you reduce the metallicity. We today here at this conference, for example, hear essentially about these 3 luminous objects, because we are still analyzing data. And so please keep in mind whatever you hear so far of LEGO is a bit based on only a subsample. It's not yet fully using the entire sample. So we need a bit more time to make use of the entire survey. This is from a paper from Ashley Barnes, which was the first paper using the actual LEGO data. Just to give you an idea, we mapped here W49A and B, essentially get a large set of molecular emission lines. This gives you a sense of the data complexity. So we have in this paper alone 25 well-detected transition groups. Not only detected, but well detected. We are currently extracting 34 transition groups from the data, up to, depending on the target. Not all of those are detected, but that's what we're extracting.
2 more minutes. Yes.
So data collection spanned more than half a decade, 25 targets, many spectral setups, and resulting in more than 650 data cubes. So the point here is that the data processing for this is highly complex, and that's essentially what's taking the time to process the entire data set. We are using Python for management of the processing of the pipeline, and PyGelders for the actual heavy lifting. And without going into the details here, we are essentially, in the end, generating Jupyter notebooks that document the entire data processing, and they get archived to GitHub, where they can be accessed long term to actually exactly understand how a specific data set was processed. We have out an exploratory data release, as I call it, ER0. You can access it either through the LEGO program website or on the Harvard Dataverse. And this is an exploratory release in the sense that I still would like to have a few more eyeballs on the data, including everybody at the conference, very much invited to look at the data and tell me things that you think might still need some refinement. Based on having that a bit more polished, as well as the data reduction scripts that are final, but are maybe at the moment not as elegant as they should be for public release. This will all come out this summer as a proper DR1 release, and then we'll keep pushing papers and data out as the papers are getting published. To show you a few example studies, and I'm not going to go into much detail because other people at the conference are talking about this. LEGO started with this one paper of mine in 2017, where we essentially tried to understand in this diagram, how deep do you have to go into a cloud in order to see a lot of line emission from a particular emission line transition. And here, as you see in the upper diagram, the earlier the molecules peak, that means that their emission is driven more by the large spatial scales. And that was one of the first interesting example results, that HCN is actually not very well probing into the deep layers of a cloud. It's more a surface tracer. And the only molecule in that early study that really stood out as a dense gas tracer is N2H+. Meanwhile, Ashley Barnes did some other things here, like comparing the proportionality constant between mass of dense gas and HCN luminosity. And that is one of the key things I would like you to take away, that the relationship between molecules, in this case HCN, but in general molecules, and the state of a molecular cloud differs by a large factor. Here, HCN, for example, by a factor 10 or more. And so that means that you cannot simply study one molecular cloud and hope to learn everything, but you have to study a large set of molecular clouds and try to learn them and understand them as an ensemble. That's the point of LEGO, because if you just focus on one single cloud, that's not going to cut it.
Jens, I'm sorry for interruption, but time is up. So if you can wrap up your talk, that would be great.
Yes, I'm wrapping up. So this is just another way to look at this. Lucas is going to talk about this later today. And again, there are some clouds where HCN is tracing dense gas and others where it's not. Just very brief. Obviously, we are not only pursuing extragalactic research, but we're also pursuing the dynamics of star formation in the Milky Way, where you can study kinematics of star-forming gas that tells you something about infall motions. And then we also have molecular abundances that tells you something about the timeline of star formation from astrochemistry. And I'm not going to go into that. So, summary and outlook. Again, take two things away. You need to understand a large ensemble of molecular clouds if you want to understand molecular line emission from galaxies. One single cloud is not going to cut it. And then, obviously, you can study other physics in the Milky Way of actual star formation. Look at our data, look at our survey, and give us feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens, for a very nice talk. I'm pretty sure we'll hear more about it in upcoming talks. So we have time for one quick question from the audience, and we have one already on the Zoom.
Hi, Jens, it's Johnny Henshaw. Thanks for the talk. You showed quite early on this sort of systematic offset in the extragalactic systems. Is that related to the figure that's currently on the slide?
Yeah, and I should have. I realized that in the end I didn't explain that well. I didn't have the time. The point here is that let me see whether I can just to put that figure on there.
For context, my interest is the CMZ.
It's not the CMZ.
No, I appreciate that, but if it's analogous to.
Yes. Obviously, there is a lot of, we are talking about orders of magnitude here. And having small factors of offsets may or may not be significant. I think that this offset in that particular case cannot be entirely discarded. This is from a 2017 paper, if you want to look that up, I believe. It cannot be entirely discarded because uncertainties should cancel out or errors should cancel out. But yeah, in some sense, either galaxies form differently, form stars differently than the solar neighborhood, or we still have to better understand how exactly we relate dense gas and star formation through specific emission lines, and that may be HCN. HCN might not be your line of choice to do that. That might be the other lesson.
Okay. Now, one question from Sophia on Zoom. So, Sophia, can you just unmute and ask?
I think she can't.
Okay. Do you want to?
She said cannot speak, so she said that this is nice, but I know she said that she can speak.
No,
she can't speak. Okay, she's on the bus.
She would like to know whether most of the LEGO clouds are for spiral arms, giant molecular clouds, and are there projects to do that in the CMZ or on the bar ends in the galaxy?
So the sound dropped out badly. I understand that the question is, are the LEGO clouds in spiral arms, or are they in the disk? Are they in the galactic center? We avoided. At least that's what I understood. I'm trying to explain to answer that. We are not studying the galactic center because there are plenty of other projects that study the very galactic center. I would say that the inner 3 kiloparsec, to have that dedicated study there would be very interesting. It's very difficult to identify clouds in that particular region because kinematic distances are a bit tricky in that region. I hope that answers that question. I also can't read it at the moment, given my setup here. Sorry.